Okay, thank you very much for your invitation to this, I would say, important and also inspiring event in different ways. But of course, I need to thank also Professor Gklavinis for this introduction and for the question that poses, which is rhetoric, I suppose. But I'm here representing, let's say, even you, Panagiotis, we represent here the bad guys in this panel, because why we need the presence of law in this debate about ethos in medicine. So I must say that this is a challenging topic because, in my view, the concept of ethos is always related to our personal morality, to patterns of individual behavior imposed by our conscience and self-determination, as Professor Gklavinis mentioned. Therefore, why the presence of law is relevant? After all, legal rules represent patterns of behavior imposed by an external factor, which is the state, and they require obedience, no matter if our conscience agrees with their content. So, to answer, at least in the medicine's context, we need to remember some elements that shape the landscape of medical ethics since their first appearance throughout so many centuries. For some reason, okay. Good. So, in the past, the model of the patient and doctor relationship was that of the so-called medical paternalism. This model characterized the practice of all traditions in medicine, including the Hippocratic tradition of Western medicine. Its basic element was the active role of the physician only, whilst the patient remained more or less a silent factor. So, in the traditional paternalistic model, first, the physician, as you can see, determines freely the patient's best interest. The physician decides alone, does not necessarily provide information, and she is exclusively responsible for the patient's health. On the other hand, the patient has only the freedom to choose the attending physician and should comply passively with medical decisions. Now, the paternalistic model was indeed proved very successful for many centuries. And this is because traditional physicians were considered responsible before their colleagues and gods also, in times when medicine was still largely characterized by religious and, I would say, sometimes shamanic elements. Indeed, patients could entrust the physician as a representative of a divine task, and on their part, physicians knew that they were allowed to act under strong ethical commitment where the malpractice was not excused. The experience of the Nazi doctors' atrocities, the notorious syphilis study in the States, both involving programs of involuntary medical experimentation in humans, and mostly a third factor, the rise of human rights as a universal ethical and legal standard after World War II, challenged profoundly the model of medical paternalism. Starting originally from the area of medical research and covering gradually all the fields of medical practice, a new model shaped the patient-doctor relationship based on the principle of patient autonomy and the rule of informed consent. Again, Panagiotis mentioned that. According to this rule, the person who seeks access to medical services is the one who decides on any relevant medical act to their body after receiving appropriate information from the attending physician. The new model of autonomy was more convenient to the modern conditions that characterize the medical practice, with the extensive specialization in medicine, the vast use of technology, and the direct access of patients to medical information, particularly after the internet era. So these conditions make it necessary the active involvement of patients in decisions related to their healthcare and the introduction of the basic duty of physicians to inform and discuss with them the available options in relevance. So, in the new model of autonomy, the physician has a duty to inform the patient or the duty to tell the truth. Also, he has a duty to respect the patient's values and self-determination priorities, and she should comply in principle with the patient's choice, the patient's last say. On the other hand, the patient determines freely their own best interests. They decide not only for the attending physician, but also for the phases of treatment by consenting to given choices. They receive information only if they consent to, which is the so-called right not to know, right of ignorance, if you want. And last but not least, the patient has the option to refuse treatment. So this was a re-establishment of trust between the two parts, the physician and the patient. And that re-establishment of trust is now appears now on conventional grounds, since conscience has been proved an insufficient basis. From that point exactly, under this profound change of understanding, the physician's role and the role of medical ethos, and the role of medical ethos, the involvement of law has been unavoidable. The autonomy model characterizes nowadays not only the rules of generally accepted medical ethics and bioethics, but also the modern biolaw, which includes the rules of medical law as a basic part. Let's visit now the pillars of the law's presence in modern medicine. First, we need to distinguish between the ethical principles, and the previous speaker made a reference to these principles, a nice reference, and the legal rules in relevance. The ethical principles influence the interpretation of these rules in any specific case, and they reflect their ultimate regulatory purpose. These are known by the classic book on biomedical ethics by Beauchamp and Childress, and they are first, the autonomy principle, requiring personal freedom regarding direct control over our bodies, meaning in particular that any person should be free to consent or not to medical interventions of any kind. Second, the beneficence principle, known from the Hippocratic era already, according to which a physician should always act for the benefit of the patient's health. Third, again, an Hippocratic principle, the non-maleficence principle, requiring from physicians to prevent harmful interventions when exercising their duties, and for the justice principle, according to which everyone should have access to health resources under conditions of equity. Before thanking you, having in mind these ethical principles, we can distinguish the three pillars of legal regulation, focusing on specific legal rules now. These are the informed consent rule, expressing the autonomy principle, the human dignity rule, expressing the beneficence and non-maleficence principles, but also the justice principle, the patient privacy rule, expressing also the autonomy principle with its two dimensions, the medical secrecy duty of physician, known from Hippocrates, and the protection of health data. Dear friends, it is essential to remember this combination of the three regulatory pillars with the ethical principles in medicine. It makes meaningful the role of contemporary law as a necessary dimension of what we continue to call ethos 2.5 millennia after the oath. So thank you very much.